Hello, and welcome to the Evelyn Y. Davis Studios at the National Press Foundation. Today we're talking about combining visuals and technology for powerful storytelling.
The National Press Foundation is a nonprofit dedicated to helping journalists cover complex topics with depth and accuracy. We serve journalists in the U.S. and around the world.
I'm Sandy Johnson, President of the National Press Foundation. Vivid visual storytelling is critical to journalism today. Samuel Granados and Kevin Schaul of the Washington Post are here to share how the Post created the Waypoint. This compelling project about European refugees won the National Press Foundation's Best Use of Technology in Journalism Award. So thank you, Sam and Kevin, for joining us today. So tell us, what was the origin of this story idea?
Well, basically, I think the project was conceived by late 2015, when we were at the peak of the refugee crisis in Europe. By that time, around 5,000 people, 5,000 refugees a day were arriving to the shores of Europe. And we were kind of thinking on how we could keep creating or exploring new formulas for telling this story. And yeah, like we work for the graphics department. We usually work with data, maps. We usually, by that time, like we were kind of creating a lot of representation, data visualizations, and I remember specifically a day in which Swati Swarma, a colleague of us at the Post, at the time digital editor for Foreign, I remember she came with a new spreadsheet, kind of the most up-to-date spreadsheet, like bringing us the number of arrivals a day, like. And I remember talking to Kevin about what we could do with that, and I remember us struggling at the time, trying to quantify, trying to visualize, and we just thought, like, I mean, we could do better than just represent it visually. Like, we needed to understand more. I remember he said something like, making the math. Remember that? Making the math about, I think it was like 7 people arriving every second to the shores or something like that. But we were like, how can we dig deeper into it? So we reached out to Kat Downs, the director of the department, and touched base with her about how about sending some of us to the island of Lesbos, where they were kind of arriving. So that was how.
Well, great. Let's dive in, and you guys can walk us through how you did it.
Sure. So. Just to explain a little bit about the project, it's a sort of a full-screen video experience. We really wanted people to feel immersed and be able to put themselves in the positions of these refugees as much as possible. And when Sam came back from the reporting trip, he had all these just amazing details of things that people left behind, or he asked people to draw on a diagram how far they thought they were in the process of finding a new home. Who did they leave behind? All these pieces of their lives that don't really fit into a regular traditional written story. And so it was our challenge to find a way to express all that in an immersive, compelling way. And we settled on this full screen video experience where readers control the pace. So we can hang on a shot longer than you might. Because if a reader's ready for the next thing, they can just tap the screen to move on. We added this branching system where we asked readers, do you want to see basically the side story? And so the reader could decide, like, yes, I'm very interested. Let me see those extra 5 things, or just keep me on the traditional linear path. So that's kind of where we ended up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you're going to have to ask Tyler to show the slides that you want. So if you want him to get rolling on that, so you can continue the story, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe we can show some of the slides in the second section where, I mean, we would like to show, for example, what was different, or what we feel like was different in this project, or what was helpful for us, was kind of having a first-hand impression of what the scenario and the experience was looking like. So yeah, like for example, something we tried to do, we were gathering while being there different visuals. I think we could talk or divide between conventional visuals versus non-so-conventional visuals, because on one end, Zoe Murphy, our colleague in video, shoot amazing capture with her camera, amazing scenes of the arrivals, but at the same time we were trying to explore in interviews with the refugees to learn more about, like we realized like they were kind of using mobile devices to capture their own trip and to capture their own journey and struggle. So we spent many hours with the refugees, trying to gather information from their phones, from their devices. She, for example, in the image is Lanek, a girl from Iraq. She, for example, was with her father, and it was the second time she was trying to cross. So she was able to share with me the story of how they got sent back when they were heading to Italy by the Turkish Coast Guard. She was able, for example, to share with me pictures of how the process of dealing with the smuggler was, and I feel like some of these non-conventional visuals that like allow us to get to places where we were not able to. Like for example, we met Ali Akhtar and Mokim Mokim, 2 photographers from Iran, who had documented their journey. Basically,
they were Iranian photographers who were fleeing, and so they had their equipment still.
That's correct. Like they actually had grabbed their camera, and they had just for safety when they were kind of crossing on the boat. So they unwrapped it. Just arriving to Greece, for example, but they were able to share with us the pictures that they had took during their journey, right? Like they told about how dealing with smugglers was so dangerous for them. Like they got threatened. Like they had took so great and beautiful pictures of this experience, because not all is also about the sad moments about the journey, but they were also sharing like the little experiences and having fun, and how arriving to a new place, like they had those fresh eyes that I think like many people or many of us couldn't understand before going there. Like they arrive into a place where it's a totally different culture. It's some sort of what we tried to do was sort of bring in this subjective perspective into the project. For example, we borrowed them our cameras. Like they were, like for example, here they are in the image. You can see how they are holding their Nikon kind of a camera.
Those are the 2 Iranian refugees?
Yeah, that's correct. Exactly. Yeah, and they were holding. I mean, they were showing their photography degrees. They were showing their their most precious items. It's kind of what they were carrying with them, right? So we borrowed them our cameras, and they were taking pictures of the harbor of Mytilene, of the area, taking pictures, looking at the scenes that we were not even paying attention.
That seems like an incredibly lucky stroke to come across two photographers. How did you happen to find them?
So, like one of the mornings, I was, as every morning, trying to shoot the first shots with lights in the day, because it was the moment in which you could see all the boats being stranded on the shore. And I was shooting there, and Ali, one of the two guys, approached me, and he was just telling me about he was kind of curious too about what kind of camera I was using. And
Common language.
Yeah, common language. Yeah, exactly. Beyond even any struggle or we were just talking about, photography, and he then started telling me about his journey, and we engaged in a conversation, and then we spent like a whole day basically sharing and getting to learn more about that.
So what was your experience with the, did most of the refugees have some kind of device with them, a phone or a laptop or something? And I guess, it's commonly known here as user-generated content. But, did you go in hoping that you could find, refugees that had that? Were you actively seeking that? Or
So I wasn't on the reporting trip for this project, but I think we had talked about really just seeing what a more of a visual thinker would see on the ground reporting, and I think that speaks to that idea where Samuel was looking for. Just different, different new ways to tell this story, to find new stories, and I think it was a huge success. It on the end where back in the office trying to figure out what to do with it all was a really fun challenge, but I do think that was part of the goal of the trip. To find new visuals.
And you talk about visual tests. What do you mean by that?
I think we have a slide on that. I think in the second section. It's a mostly white background. Sam, you should speak to them. Yes.
Yeah. Like as we were saying earlier, right? Like we were. Since the beginning, like the conception of the project was like, okay, what can we do to tell and to explore new formulas to tell this story? And we were, we were thinking on, okay, can we, for example, use the stuff the refugees are shooting on their phones? Can we gather the maps they are carrying with them? Can we tell this story through these visuals? And part of it was about understanding better the way they were, perceiving this journey. Understanding from a subjective perspective, if you want. Like we were aiming to, as I said earlier, like we were. We had been reporting, we had been creating graphics and charts and many other visualizations, but we had not really had the opportunity, at least in the graphics department, to get the first-hand contact to understand exactly more about their journey. So we came with this concept of why don't we try to understand tiny details, subjective details about their journey. Like for example, I don't know, like directly speak to the subjective perception they have from the journey. For example, how far do they think they are from their home or from their destination? Like that was a really simple thing to do in a line. They just had to mark with a cross how far they were from one place or the other. And you should think like the different nationalities arriving to this place made it like even more interesting because it's like not everyone was perceiving the journey in the same way. Like many of the people I met had not even seen the sea before. Many of them were not calling the Mediterranean Sea a sea, but the big river. So for us, understanding about this nuance was really important in order to create later on the process the platform from that perspective, right? Like for example, here you get 4 slides. In the left, you can see that one I mentioned before. Like, okay, you just mark. Can you mark where you find yourself over here? So some of them would see themselves like really close.
So the left one says where they came from.
Yeah, they're coming from Afghanistan.
Right.
They're
okay.
going to Germany, and they are in Greece, and Greece is marked there. Like
So that's where they think they are in
exactly,
the journey.
that's correct. yeah.
Okay.
Like in the right, for example, top, I would ask them, how many people is traveling with you? Can you just draw them inside these 2 lines? So if this is you, so the icon in the middle, who else is with you? So who else is waiting for you in the part right of the diagram, and who else did you left behind? Or for example, in the bottom right corner, you can see there. I was asking them, like, for example, can you tell me how much money and what was the mean you were kind of using? Like, was it by walk, by car, from place to place?
So you just use icons.
That's correct.
To overcome the
Yeah.
language barrier.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and
right.
then I think like that was kind of that was something like interesting to be done because, like, for example, most of the times we wouldn't have an interpreter there. Some of the times they would engage very easily because they were icons, and they would have this opportunity to write and to draw and to express and to tell you about their journey. And there is like you would have people talking Pashtun or Urdu or I don't know, many Arab, like many different languages that all of the sudden in just a sheet of paper with a few icons they were able to communicate and express.
How did you shoot the overhead video, the aerial video?
Yeah, so the drone footage, there is like a segment of drone footage.
Drone
like
footage,
yes,
okay.
that was provided by UNHCR.
Oh, the United Nations
Yeah, that's
Refugee
correct.
Agency.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a few
okay.
clips in the presentations, specifically in the introduction that were provided by UNHCR. Yeah.
Yeah, that shot.
Yeah, that shot is-
absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it was really that's kind of a part in Lesbos, right? Like what we are seeing in that image.
Okay, so you did the reporting on the ground, and how much video, photographs? I mean, do you know how many visuals you had? How many hours worth, or how many visuals?
It's hard to keep all the projects straight, but we had I think we had about 40 hours, and when Sam and Zoanne got back, we weren't exactly sure. Like, okay, we have all of this information. Should this be one story? Should it be a series? Are there opportunities to split one set of details into its own thing and use the rest for something else? So that was, that took a long time to figure out. Speaking with what Sam and Zoanne saw, what are the main themes that you saw, and how do we turn this into a story? And that was tough from a storytelling perspective because there was just so much, but also from a technical perspective because they didn't remember every shot that they had or every interview or all these different things. It's just a lot to comb through to before you even know what's available.
So let's talk about the technology or the tool that you built to try to sort through and bring some analysis to all of this material you had.
Yeah. So for a future project for the Barriers project, which is a sort of a similar, like a progression on this. we learned that we just needed an easier way to look through things and categorize things. So we built a tool to basically just like allow us to sort through all the video, sort through the visuals. We could rank each clip by like 1 to 5 stars on how meaningful it is for a story, what the quality was, which is hugely important, especially if you're going full screen with it, how interesting it was visually, and that really helped us to figure out quickly what we had. We also transcribed a lot of it and put that into the system.
Mm-hmm. So you ranked every visual that you had?
I think we might have ranked every visual.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like
yeah, and that's why this tool really helped.
Mm-hmm.
It was because it's based on Google Docs. A lot of the stuff that we do is based on Google Docs, because we can have however many people working on it at the same time. And so it wasn't too hard to, flip through a video, okay, check, flip through a new video, check. I think that saved us a bunch of time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like part of it was like how we can kind of create some sort of a structured way to process all that information. I think like that was kind of part of things that we've been kind of learning into this project, and I think like that's kind of something interesting. Like the way in which we have been evolving from Waypoint to other projects like Barriers has been in the way we gathered the information also has been kind of helpful. Like I remember the first one like being pretty chaotic with all the hard drives, plenty of information, my computer blocking down and being totally
too much information.
Too much information. Yeah. So as Kevin said, like the building of these tools to manage the information and easily, quickly access to quotes, quickly access to visuals and stuff was really helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how could other reporters or visual journalists replicate what you did with the Google Docs? Was it just a simple, or did you build a program or?
So it definitely required a little bit of programming, but it wasn't. It's not like you would need a team of PhDs, to build it.
Which most newsrooms do not have.
Exactly. Yeah. For something like this, it was really just. I think it was more of a design problem than a computer science problem, where we just needed to figure out what is the best way to go through all this stuff. And with the tool that we made, we took all kinds of shortcuts where it wouldn't work for anyone else. It might not work for another project, but we just kind of put it together slowly. Started with a spreadsheet and then started working on like a different way to visualize the spreadsheet where you could see screenshots from the actual video, and just kind of like building it step by step as we saw a new need.
Actually, Tyler, would you go back to the slide you had up previously with all of the text? Yeah, that one. Can you tell us what that is, what that's meant to show?
So this shows a Google Doc, which is this is actually the Google Doc where we structured the whole story. And so where you see sort of at the top it says template text in the most common landing areas. So that's where we wrote the sentence that would appear over a video. And then the next few are just sort of, okay, this is the video file. On iPhone, we're using stills instead of videos, so this is the still that should show up. And each big chunk there would be a new slide. And so this was basically, there isn't a CMS that handles something as fluid as what we were going for, especially because we didn't know when we sat down to start what it's going to look like in the end. You know, we really had no idea. And so,
So this is the way you organize the text, the small amounts of, I guess they were really paragraphs or cut lines in a sense, and then you put the visuals that you from your treasure trove of visuals. These are the ones that you chose to go with each section, right?
Yeah, yeah. So like this was basically our WordPress for this project. This is where we're arranging everything, and it was really helpful for reporters who could, it's a little bit scary, but if you know what you're looking for, it's pretty easy to follow and adjust the text. Pretty easy to rearrange things. So this really worked for us. We actually use this for most of our graphics now, where we'll have text for a while, and then all of a sudden we'll have a big static graphic, more text, maybe a photo gallery or a video or something. We're writing most of our content in a Google Doc, much like this.
We've got a question here. Curious if the Post ran some of this content with regular coverage, or was it collected with a project in mind?
So it was collected with this project in mind, for sure. But once we got back and things were happening, we would cut video for a story.
For a spot story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, like when we were at the island, I remember Joanne had to shoot a couple of videos, for example, short for a specific story on the winter, and how the winter in the island, or how the island was prepared for the winter or not, on security, because I remember at that time was when the Paris attack happened. So we were in the island with them. Part of our minds were on what was already going on, and how we could kind of make part of our content fit into other stories. But definitely the exploratory approach, which was kind of the starting point at the beginning, was like present also during the whole process.
So all of these assets that you have can be applied to daily or enterprise reporting that other journalists are doing down the road. Yeah, that's great.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
and for example, a later project that we did, the Barriers Project.
You should probably say what that is,
Yeah,
Kevin.
sure. So
Barriers
that was
means-
about border walls going up around the world. I think it was in 2015. The most barriers were built, ever in the past 300 years, probably in all of history. And so we did a similar project about that, where we visited Israel, Palestine, a bunch of different places in Europe. We traveled the entire U.S.-Mexico border, looking at how, what do people think about these fences and walls going up on all different sides. Spoke to some of the people who built these walls, politicians, peoples whose land these walls went through. So this was another big project, which took probably more than 6 months in all, and we went reporting specifically for this, but we were able to, if something happens in the news where President Trump brings up his policy on building a wall.
Like in Phoenix last night.
Exactly, yeah. We can quickly spin some of this content that we already have and write it pointed to a news event, and kind of get some more use out of it.
Do you want to talk about the branching technique that you used? And that's the slide that has all of the photos, right? Or all the images.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Basically, let's say what we try to do with this. This slide you are looking at maybe we can, you can switch to the next one, I think. So we show the starting point. So
There we go.
This is like sort of where we started at. This was sort of the very, very, very first draft we put together in terms of a storyline, and it was aimed to show in blocks of, and I think like there are kind of 5-6 blocks in there. Like it was meant to show the path through the island, right? Like we were aiming to tell this story in how the refugees were arriving to Europe, how the refugees were being processed also by the authorities, and how was this, walking through the island into their way to north. So when we came back, and once we had the information arranged, and we could see like how we had these sort of buckets of, I don't know, items, photographies of items that people had left behind the shores, or location specifically as the process itself. Like we had this sort of narrative we were trying to build on how the whole path across the island was. So we realized like for example, the refugees were like every single place, like every, I don't know, like there were kind of 6 really marked stages into this process. Like you could see how different was the arrival to the shore, for example, because they would get there sick, they would get there plenty of joy sometimes. You could see how they were finally in Europe, and they were kind of, so you could see how that was totally different from the process of walking to the next level, walking to the camps where they were on a rush. You could see that thing of people, feeling that people on the move, that sense of urgency. You could see, I don't know, even when they were in the process of registration, you could feel that anxiety, frustration, these lines for hours, for days. That was totally different. And you could, even in the harbor, when they were about to depart in their way to north, you could feel also that how they were rested, how they were kind of really willing to talk, how they were kind of so we decided to build this narrative based on emotions, and how these emotions flew through different stages, right? So in that one slide we were kind of seeing earlier, that was the way in which we tried to arrange the content first. Like, can we create this sort of several steps kind of process in which the user can kind of walk through those same emotions? I mean, let's remember that we were trying or aiming to build this sort of immersive experience where the user could walk through the slides and have the control and feel the power of this tapping and going from slide to slide, moving forward as the refugees are moving forward to, but at the same time try to convey those emotions that they were kind of having in those different stages, right? So in this presentation, what we can see is sort of that sort of thinking. What we realized though with this is like the length of the whole presentation with all this content put in line was really too deep, because obviously you had to go through approximately 30 slides to get to the end. So that's why we ended up with the branches concept, which is in the...
Is that the other slide?
Exactly.
There we go. So branches are essentially what used to be known as sidebars. Is that fair? Oh.
Yeah,
maybe like they should be meant as, you know, you at a certain point in the presentation you are asked, do you want to dig deeper into this particular story or scenario, or do you want to keep moving? So that's kind of what they were meant to, and that's kind of how you get to, yes, I'm gonna stay in the shore, I'm gonna see those objects left behind, or yes, I want to meet the family of Hamed, or yes, I want to and this, what you are seeing here, is kind of all thumbnails of the different slides put together in the structure as they are in the...
And how many branches are there on the project?
Maybe 5 to 6, or I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah.
Was it, did it help in a technological way to split those off, or was it not really relevant to how you built the project?
I would say not really from a technical perspective, but like Sam was saying, we have to adjust what we do for the realities of how people read our work. And one of those realities is not everyone has a half hour to spend with something.
Mm-hmm.
And so the branches were a way to not skimp out on our story, but also allow people to give people a way to skim.
Mm-hmm.
Skimming is something that we think about quite a bit, where if you're on one of our pieces for 30 seconds or a minute, we still want you to understand main points.
Mm-hmm.
And so in regular graphics, we'll do that a lot with our headers, where we'll use large bold type that's not just not really just an organizing tool, but it's also sort of a sentence on these are the main points.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to bring that to this style of project with the branches, where you can just quickly tap through it, and we hope you would still get something out of it. But if you do have time and are interested in it, we're going to show you all of our best stuff.
And do you know approximately average length of time on site for this project, or what it was when it when it first published?
Some metrics, we get some metrics, and
Uh-huh.
and I remember people. I mean, one of the most interesting things was a really high percentage of people was getting to the end,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of something
I'm sorry, Sam.
we are getting to the end of the presentation.
Oh,
Mhm.
went
Yeah,
all the way
we're
through.
all the way through, exactly.
Right. Uh-huh. Mhm.
Yeah, much more than
Mhm.
our articles, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
I think it was definitely more than a third made it all the way through, which
Mhm.
Yeah,
which was
for 30 slides of 20 seconds, it's like a 30 minutes experience. It's a lot today in internet to scroll. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And did the 30-minute did it just evolve as you were, collecting all the information and putting it together? Or, did you know you couldn't go any longer than that? Or, is there any barriers to length of time?
There is
Mhm.
always a struggle, I think,
Mhm.
in between the assets you got, and you want to show obviously the best stuff you have, but at the same time you want the story to be meaningful and to make sense, and to be a whole storyline, and this is the problem, the storyline, and the resolve of the solution of the thing. We definitely were trying to get as short as possible, because we knew our assets were kind of a lot, and I think one of the ways we found for that was okay, what if we try to create these branches? And that's kind of why we got a little bit more relaxed when we learned we could kind of, okay, can we tell this story still with depth enough? And yeah, I think the branches definitely help for that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the prototypes that you built and how you brought in user testing, which is certainly an interesting facet of the whole project.
So with when doing something like this, it's all totally new to us, new to our readers. Design is a huge thought all the way through. We want people to see the story, and really that's it. We don't want people to recognize, how interesting the format is, or how, if I need to pause it, how do I pause it? We don't want people to have to think about stuff like that. We really just want them to experience, as much as possible what it was like to be a refugee. And so a big piece of that is, we have to test it on people. We have to put it in front of someone who's never seen it, and watch them use it, and see if they figure it out, see what they struggle with. That's hugely important, because the way that we consume things is very different, and especially the more that you sit with a project, the more comfortable you might feel with it, and you might think that, you know, this button is huge. It's obvious that this is the pause button, for example, but until you see someone try to pause who hasn't seen it before, you really don't know.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get those users, the prototype users?
Mm-hmm. So we used people from, we just asked people around the newsroom and around the rest of the company for our actual site, you know, site-wide things. We do have a more formal process for bringing, you know, readers or everyday people off the street in.
Off the street.
So it's not for something like this where you know, it's a really big investment in terms of time and money for doing the reporting and building the story and all of that. And so we, you know, it's not a perfect solution to ask people in news to use this thing, but it's a lot better than not asking anyone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what kind of feedback did you get that you incorporated into the project then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that, for example, and we have seen this thing kind of evolve, right, from the Waypoint to barriers, and I don't know, for example, has to do with tapping versus scrolling. We move away from tapping for this other project, the New Age of Walls, just because was feeling more naturally the scrolling process in there. Like, for example, when we were at the iteration and prototyping part of a New Age of Walls, we were aiming to create something close to what the Waypoint was looking like in mobile. But then when we realized like people was feeling as great experience as it was in desktop, we thought like we had to change. Like some basic things, I think like you don't even think about. Like, for example, when you are in a mobile phone and you have the mobile phone vertically, and then
And you have what, Sam?
the mobile phone vertically,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at it like in a vertical position, right? Like if you just flip it, content is gonna flip too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's something like you don't think too much about when you are on the ground reporting. Like, should I shoot this thing vertically versus should I shoot this thing horizontally? Then I think like all of that iterating process sort of
What's the answer to that question, by the way?
I mean, I think we are moving more towards a verticality
Vertical?
situation. I mean, mobile is becoming more and more important. I think like still, like for example, we decided to crop videos as squares in this last project.
Mm-hmm.
While in Waypoint we were just flipping from vertical to horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't really would say like I don't know if that's the answer or not for the future. Honestly, I don't know.
Changes.
Definitely, we are paying more and more attention to how the things look like in the phone and the way users use their phones, right? Like, I don't see that many people when in the metro, like looking at the mobile phone horizontally. You really see the people looking at it vertically, and that's something to keep in mind when approaching one of these reporting processes too, right? Like
that, and that's right. It's not an answer, but you have to think about it from the start, from gathering this, you know, from talking to people, how you shoot interviews, all of that is, if you do it with some sort of a form in mind, of course it's going to turn out better.
Mm-hmm.
And so for these projects, we did not have exactly what it was going to look like nailed down by any means, but we did know we're doing, you know, at least we knew we were going to try full screen, and we were going to we're probably going to use just stills for mobile. And so knowing those two things while you're reporting is hugely helpful. It's really hard to retrofit content into a different orientation.
Right. Yeah. Did you have other lessons learned that other journalists could learn from?
Wow. I think for example, when reporting, keeping a structured head is really important, I think.
Keeping what, Sam?
An structured mind on, okay, what do you need? Where do you want to go? Is sort of, at least having that guidance is important. And I think being on the ground, thinking, having some idea of what you're heading probably is something helpful. Like for example, in the reporting, while the reporting of barriers, we created this sort of what we call it consistency grid. It was just a spreadsheet, kind of with lines and rows and columns. We would gather information regarding 3 factors we were interested in, and there were rhetoric around the world, efficiency of these walls, and impact of the walls in nature or peoples, etc. As a way to, at least at the end of the process, when you are back to your newsroom and you can start drafting your storyline, you don't have holes, right? For example, that was, I personally feel like that was something learned from Waypoint towards these other projects where I remember by Waypoint, I remember what if we would have shoot this video this way, or what if we would have done this thing differently, or I remember that process being something okay, I wish at least you would have some sort of a scheme of where things should be kind of leaning, right?
We have a question here. What types of discussions took place on whether to serve ads and other common business side considerations?
Yeah, that's an important one. At the end of the day, ads are really, really, really important, right? For ads, etc. Here, it was challenging because it's we were aiming for a full screen experience, being as immersive as possible in terms of, okay, can we get rid of as much noise, as possible in the experience, in order to let the reader just go and flow with the story. So I feel like sometimes when we are creating these sort of long-term projects, we do have some flexibility in ways in which the ad can kind of be serving in a different format, or the content can kind of be sponsored in a different way. But yeah, I think as these are kind of, I would say even experimental projects where we do get to break our regular templates to create new content or new forms, let's say, we do have some margin to play with it.
Well, that's great. So how can a smaller newsroom with big ambitions replicate what you have been able to do with Barriers and the Waypoint and the other projects? Obviously you had a big team, you had the luxury of time. Do you have any suggestions for other newsrooms that would like to tackle something this ambitious?
Well, I think personally, I think as Kevin mentioned earlier, these are definitely, it's a big investment of resources, having a few people working on the ground, at the same time having a few people working specifically on a project for a few months. I think what's interesting about it is or the way I would think about it if I would be in a newsroom, in a smaller size newsroom, is these experiments, if you want to call it that way, are worth, because You get a really great outcome in different ways. On one side, you get to generate content that we are still using, like all the coverage in the world that came even after the election, all migration pieces we've done. Like we still have some sort of a knowledge on the topic, visual resources that we are kind of assets that we are using and reusing, complementing with new stuff, of course, etc. But that's kind of one end of it. There is a kind of a second thing that I think like is really important, and it's like how this project became a physical template, that you can use in several different other pieces. Like it is true, like this project took a while, but once it was done, several other pieces, like I remember Flint Water, I remember Katile Deki's biographic page, I remember Zika, Project on Zika, all other projects that we are using the same template we had built into these months, while using just a few weeks, right? Like there is a process in there in which the base you are building is definitely worth because it's paying. And I think like the one that is kind of more important, like these collaborative projects where these are kind of, as I said, extraordinary experiences where you get to have kind of roles mixed, right? Like for example, you get to have people with design skills on the ground, people with computer science skills on the ground, while having video reporters looped into the process of how the project is made. Like I feel like these sort of projects open doors in the newsroom and help to create collaborative teams. Like you usually put together a little pod of 2, 3 people, 4 people. It's not like a bunch of it's not like a big crew. It's like a small team that is able to translate and make some profit of the knowledge and experiences learned in one process into the next project and into the next projects. And it definitely seems like it's a large investment at the beginning, but in the long run, it's definitely something that pays. And they maybe will not be the projects that carry the most visits or that other sort of outcome. But in terms of branding, you need to show your readers too that you are definitely wanting to invest and to take the time to create long form stories, which I think is important to you today, right? Like to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, Kevin, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. I think a big part of it is just building momentum and proving that you can do something new and interesting that's small, and if that works, show it to your bosses and say, we did this was pretty successful, can we try something just a little bit bigger this time? And I think as you build up, you really build buy-in across the newsroom. You can build relationships, and do, eventually do something really big, like one of these projects. I think another thing is you can look in your own neighborhood for story ideas. I mean, there are all sorts of stories that don't require international flights. that are absolutely worth telling in a new and visual way. I would say, start small, start nearby, find the most passionate people in the newsroom, and eventually, I think people will be impressed and convinced.
Yeah, I should point out that the award that you guys won for the Waypoint, an international, compelling story, it was won the year before by the Des Moines Register, also a medium-sized newsroom, and they just put their best foot forward, essentially.
Yeah.
So you talked about being able to use the template on other projects. Why don't you guys go ahead and let's look at some of those projects, and you can describe what they are.
Sure. So we definitely have a slide on a Zika project, and this was a case where the template was actually it was used but also improved, and so this story includes sort of takes the branches to another level where you can choose which story you want to see. And again, we're mindful of people's time, so we'll say, the story on the left is about 3 minutes, which we've found has really helped people to, if they know exactly what they're getting into, they'll spend more time on something.
Yeah, that's a smart idea.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's an example. We've also used it in, so that's the title screen, and you'll see if you compared this with the Waypoint. You'll see there, the design, the typography is all very similar. The user interaction is all basically the same. And so to create this project was really thinking about the content, finding the right story. Like we were talking about earlier, at this point, they know this is how the template works, so they can shoot specifically for that. I think Sam's right. That's a huge help in selling something like this if you can get more and more stories out of it.
Mm-hmm. And some of the other projects?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So Raising Gold, this was about Katie Ledecky, an Olympic story. Same sort of thing. I think this one didn't have any changes to the template. I think it was just exactly what we did for Waypoint. I'm sure there were a couple improvements, but largely, same ideas.
Did you do this one in real time during the Olympics, or was it published after?
That was prepared ahead of the Olympics.
Oh,
yeah, a
okay.
few weeks before.
And updated with the results or not? Was it just a standalone piece?
It was kind of a biographic story on how Ledecky grow into this big superstar.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it was just I was telling her story since she was a kid in Bethesda.
She's also a local girl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in suburban Maryland, right? Any other projects that you want us to take a peek at?
So this is about the water crisis in Flint. Again, same template, no big changes, but that's really what we're going for, is to find a new way to tell a story and make it reproducible. So I'm not sure if you worked on any of these specifically.
Nope.
Yeah, I didn't either. So these were, basically the newsroom saw, okay, we have this new way of telling stories, and everyone gets excited, starts pitching ideas on, we want to do something like that on this other huge story that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it just another great way to sort of build more momentum.
Mm-hmm. So not everything is a visual story. I mean, how do you gently tell your colleagues that will work, or I don't know about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's an important kind of part of it. Like, on one end you get, many other stories you already know, like you're not gonna get as much of visual power or power in those visuals. But I think it also has to do, or as I see it, it's also about what has been done versus what has not been done. It's not just about trying something just if it is visual, but in case it is not visual, I mean, are there any other visual opportunities that we could kind of go for?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of sort of the question. If there are, let's go for it. If there are not, let's just skip and have this thing as a regular story, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you don't have video, for example, maybe there's an illustration opportunity.
Yeah.
Or like more of a graphic sort of data chart map approach, or maybe you can think of something like the visual tests from earlier, where you create visuals, or you have other people create visuals.
Mhm. Okay, anything else that we neglected to talk about here? Did we get through all of your slides?
I think we got through all of them, yeah.
Okay, well, wonderful. So, thank you. Today we've learned how to make technology your best friend to create dynamic journalism. Our thanks to Kevin Schaul and Samuel Granados of the Washington Post for sharing their techniques. Resources from this webinar will be posted for your use on NPF's website at nationalpress.org, where we make good journalists better.